Nowadays, CB radio is relatively quiet compared to the days of the citizens band radio boom of the 1970s and 1980s. In the decades since, the dynamic has shifted completely in terms of what CB radio was all about then and what it's all about now. Back in its heyday, it was less about radio and more about socialising. The majority of those who were into the technical side of radio leaned towards amateur radio, another hobby that was booming in those days. However, those who wanted to socialise tended to lean more towards CB radio. CB radio was the original social media. It was frequented by young people, older people, men and women, and was all about making friends. Many homes had a CB radio and it was hard to find a free channel on the rig. One of the people who frequented the band in the town of Altrincham in South Manchester was Neil, or Plastic Pig. Plastic Pig was his handle, the name he used when he was on the air, and these were used to identify people by something other than their name. I met with Neil in a pub in the village of Timperley one rainy evening a couple of years ago, and after we had a good chat over a beer, he handed me a briefcase. In this briefcase is a time capsule of what CB radio looked like in the area in the 70s and 80s, and of course it was a similar story everywhere else in the country. So I thought I would share everything with you in the hope of painting a picture of what the CB radio boom was really like and how it really was the original social media. Most of these items are membership lists, newsletters and membership cards. Now there are hundreds of pages, so I'll show you as many as I can, and you can pause the video to read them in detail if you'd like.
Yeah, Roger D, hold on a sec, Ladybug. I think there's someone trying to climb over me to get you. Breaker on the side, if you're trying to get the info, bring it on back. No, the breaker's stepped down now, he's got cold feet. I don't think he can handle it either. Must be one of those turkey other breakers. Anyway, Nympho, this is really something, copying your voluptuous tones. I tell you what, I'm going to go down to 1-4. If you want to come down to 1-4 with me, then I'll know you're a true breaker and you're prepared to let the world know what you're prepared to do. Is that a copy?
Yeah, that's a copy. I'll copy wherever you go. Is that okay?
Yeah, 10-4. I do like those lovely tones. They are out of this world.
So let's start our journey in the market town of Altrincham, also known in CB lingo as Skate Town, after the famous original Altrincham ice rink. ABC, or the Ale Breakers Club, was Altrincham's largest CB club, with 233 adult members and 86 junior members at its peak. Now, this is quite staggering because Altrincham is a small town, so for a CB club to amass this amount of members, you can imagine just how busy the radio was around this time. Eyeballs or meetings were held fortnightly at the Labour Club on the Grange estate in the neighbouring village of Timperley, known as Drumtown. Alongside these meetups were other events such as discos, camping and football matches. Neil told me of a time when he and some friends drove from Altrincham calling on the radio for a meet-up at Knutsford Services not far away. And during that short journey to Knutsford, he'd pulled together a convoy of over 90 cars. Other meet-up locations for the club were referred to in CB slang and included the village of Ashley, or Toyota Town, after the old Toyota garage on the crossroads in which it sat. Next to this was the Greyhound pub, known as the Racing Dog. Timperley's eyeball pubs were the Wheatsheaf, or Cornflower, the Moss Trooper, or Super Trooper, the Moss Hotel, or Rolling Stone, and the Gardener's Arms, known as Greenfingers. Dunham, or Deertown, was named after the Dunham Massey estate, which is still home to hundreds of deer, and the local pubs nearby were the Axe and Cleaver, or Butcher's Shop, and the Stamford Arms, or Dead Earl. Discos for the club at Altrincham's Unicorn Hotel and the Moss Trooper Hotel proved extremely popular and were held regularly for all members. Here you can see a letter from two ladybreakers, Bristles and Pearly Gates, asking for Neil to put 2 tickets aside, as well as these invite cards. Many of the Ale Breakers Club members bought their CB gear from the Ayres CB Centre on Manchester Road in Broadheath, which is now an auto place next to Stamford Van Hire. Another local club was aptly named Bargain Town Breakers, which originated in the town of Sale in South Manchester. Here you can see some membership cards and an invite to their half-yearly tug of war, which was held at the old No. 3 pub in Lymm. The town of Wythenshawe, situated close to Manchester Airport, was known as Laker Town after Freddie Laker's airline and was home to at least two CB clubs, South Wythenshawe Breakers Club and Laker Town Breakers. South Wythenshawe Breakers Club released weekly newsletters, some of which you can see here. They had weekly meetings frequented by their 250 members as well as regular events. The newsletters included handy charts for newcomers to the hobby and an interesting script of an unlicensed transmitter interview as a heads up for anyone questioned by the DTI. The other Wythenshawe club was Laker Town Breakers, and this seemed to be a much smaller group, and there's limited information other than the club rules and this newsletter. Another little-known club was the South Manchester Breakers Club or Association. Apart from a couple of membership cards, I only have a newsletter which details an interesting story between a CB operator and a radio amateur in the Stockport area. The story includes instances of jamming, television interference, swearing and threats of violence. As the story shows, this stuff was taken quite seriously back in the day because CB operators wanted the ban to be legalised. And lastly, Trafford Breakers Social Club was possibly South Manchester's biggest club with at least 907 members. The group used to meet regularly at Altringham's now demolished Checkers nightclub, also known as the Chessboard. Other than this impressive members list, not much else survives. In fact, other than the contents of Neil's briefcase, virtually nothing else survives from the numerous CB clubs in the South Manchester area, except memories. It's quite clear to see how different CB radio was to amateur radio during the 70s and 80s, with CB definitely serving as the original form of social media. People of all ages took to the airwaves to make new friends, meet new people and arrange social gatherings and even dates in much the same way users of Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and dating sites do to this day. If you recall any of the handles on the lists, the places I've mentioned, or you are a member of any of these clubs, then please feel free to get in touch via the comments or via email.
Well, there you are, you've got all these breakers in the Croydon area ready to dash down to Groucho's place and he won't let us come, so why should he let you come? You've got to ask nicely, if you get invited, that's a different thing. Yeah, well, what you just said, you can come as much as you like. I mean, that's a bit out of order there because that makes me want to jump in.